on a hamster wheel, not getting anywhere new? Perhaps you've hit a plateau that has you asking, is this it? Have you accomplished all you've set out to do in life and are not feeling as fulfilled as you thought you would? It is normal at midlife to reassess what's working for you and what's not. It's also normal to want to reclaim your time, your energy, and your joy. Let's make the best out of the second half of our lives by having more fun, experiencing more peace, and feeling more joy. If any of this resonates with you, then this podcast is for you. I'm Megan Bayles Bartley. Now let's get ready to shift our shit. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of episode 5, season 3. That's a mouthful, but I like to be organized. So welcome, Megan Bayles Bartley here, joined by Elizabeth McCormack and Britt Riddle. Hello, ladies.
Hey, Megan.
Today we're talking about resentment, and in part 2 here, we're talking more about the idea of how resentment relates to boundaries. So as we've been talking this season about boundaries, I've noticed that the word resentment has come up multiple times. So how does resentment relate to boundaries?
Well, I think what we kind of mentioned in part 1, so if you haven't heard that, go back, has this kind of limit to what we're capable of and how we get together. And whether we call it boundaries or limits, or there's all kinds of different words we can use, it's almost like when the boundary hasn't been in place, when there hasn't been a limit, is when we move towards this resentment piece. And so then the onus of responsibility again comes back to us with knowing how we feel, having time to consider what's going on for me in this moment, or what have I agreed to. I think in couples therapy, it can be even more challenging. We're a week away from Christmas, and so many folks have mentioned to me like, oh, there's so many parties, there's so many things, or my spouse wants to go to this one, but I don't really want to go to that one. I want to go do this instead and spend time with our kids seeing Santa, or taking the kids to go ice skating, or whatever it may be. Or committing to somebody's mother to go decorate their tree. There's so many things that we're all committed to. And I think in couples, frequently we have a hard time saying, oh no, you go do that and I'll stay home and that'll be okay. And you can just tell people that I wasn't available. It's tends to be easy for us, like, oh, they had to work, and so your partner doesn't have to be there because they had to work. And that seems to be a really easy, we mentioned several episodes back that my family tends to use diarrhea as our excuse of getting out of things when it starts to feel uncomfortable, of like, oh nope, somebody in the family's got diarrhea, we got to stay home, we cannot go out and do that thing. And that's kind of our last minute get out of a situation, and I'm letting all the cats out of the bag for our family. But the reality is that there's got to be some way that we feel comfortable with having a boundary, having a limit that just says and we don't have to hurt someone's feelings by saying, we don't want to come to your thing, or I'm super introverted and all of that peopling is too much for me after a day of work. It's hard to express our limits with other people and be concerned about how they're going to feel, and be concerned about how we feel, about how they feel. It's a mess. It's a mess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that balance, that exchange balance of, is this something that's going to give me some energy back, some time back, some money back, some kind of resource back? And of course, there's times where we do things because we do them, or we need to do them, and we may not get anything back. But generally, especially this time of year, thinking about that balance of exchange of, what do I get back internally, especially by saying yes to these things. And I think I come back over and over and over to our yeses and our nos. And I think in our last episode 4, I talked about boundaries as truth telling, and saying our yes and letting that actually mean yes, and saying our no, but also that we can change our mind. That especially
Absolutely.
This time of year with parties, that because we said yes 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago does not mean our yes has to be yes today. And I was thinking about the DBT skill, a dialectical behavioral therapy skill, which is a form of therapy that uses an acronym STOP, S-T-O-P, and it stands for stop, first of all, for the S, and then the T is take a step back, the O is observe what you're feeling, and the P is proceed mindfully. And getting that just little pause in to notice, how am I feeling in my mind and my body as I'm getting this invitation? Is this something that feels like an actual yes? Is this something that feels like a no? And if it's a no, is there negotiation? Is there wiggle room? Or is this a hard no where we can give ourselves permission simply to say, I am not available. We don't have to have an excuse. We don't have to, but just, I'm not available. And I think sometimes we feel that pressure to hurry up and answer. And I think that's sometimes where we cross our boundaries, and then we may become resentful because we haven't been able to give ourselves that moment to think, what am I feeling? What's my body and mind telling me about this? Yes. And that can be for big things and for little things too. Especially
Absolutely.
for those of us who are introverts.
Yes. I've been thinking a lot too, as we've been talking about the fact that how women tend to be socialized in a way where there's like the lack of empowerment to voice what we need, right? It's sort of like, be flexible, go with the flow, like, I don't know. I've just really, it's because it's just becoming clear to me as we're talking that part of this is sort of, unlearning some things, or, realizing that there's some things that we've learned or that have been instilled in us that now we need to empower ourselves. Because I think about this idea of like, one, I feel like as a mom, I'm modeling for my kids how to best be in the world, right? So part of that is, how do I set good boundaries? One, with my kids, because I want to do that with them so that they will do that going forward. And guess what? They have very good boundaries with me too, which, kind of bites in me ass, but it also proves to me that like, oh, this is exactly what I've been going for. They are empowered to have a voice, and that I am receptive to hearing their voice, right? And, thinking through, if someone said, I have this array of food, like, but I need you to eat this one food, and you don't get to choose, you feel like you can't choose, you're being told what you have to do. It, if being able to say like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't eat that food because I, am vegetarian, or I whatever, like this feeling of, I think maybe sometimes we overcomplicate it because there's an emotional component to saying yes versus it being as easy as like choosing what food you want to eat. But thinking about it in that simple way of, what do I feel like eating? Do I want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Do I want a cup of chicken noodle soup? Very different options. Neither one is good or bad or right or wrong. It just sort of is like, what's going to work for me in this moment, right?
Yeah, you've described part of my life having a lot of food allergies and being socialized to receive food as a form of comfort, and especially thinking about congregational potlucks and the people who really, really want me to try their casserole or their brownie, and when I first was diagnosed with food allergies, that was really hard for me to just, it felt like I could suffer the consequences in order to not make the other person uncomfortable. And I had to get to a point of standing up for myself to say, no, one bite of this and I feel very bad. And being okay. And the other person can be uncomfortable with the no, and that's okay too.
Yeah. And making friends with that discomfort, making friends with your own discomfort of feeling like you're disappointing someone, and making friends with the idea that potentially that other person's going to be disappointed that you couldn't try their food.
Yeah. I think that go ahead.
No, go ahead, Britt.
I was going to say, I think the socialization, especially around empathy, that we as women are often socialized to maybe over empathize, and balancing empathy and with boundaries, and what does that look like to hold those two sometimes in tension with each other.
Well, having empathy for yourself,
Mhm.
right? Like we always go to like the other person, but I think like part of this is going back to, to the idea of put your oxygen mask on first, is like I need to have oxygen flowing for me to keep doing what I do. So I got to make sure that I'm checking in with myself first and see if that's something I want to do.
And I think it's the difference between their discomfort and our discomfort. I mean, when I have to say no to someone and they're standing in front of me, it's almost like my palms sweat. I want to say no, but I don't know how they're going to react. And so it's my lack of emotional trust in that person, me kind of limiting what I think about them by saying, I don't think you're going to handle this well, and I'm going to try to avoid something. It's like my hamster wheel is going, and it may just be like, for them, okay, the no's no big deal, and I have avoided it, or I've taken on more than I should. And so I really think that impulse control of avoiding the discomfort that I'm going to feel with what my perception is of what they might feel is just too much. It's just easier to be like, yep, that's fine, I'll take care of that. Like we want people to be happy with us. We want people to have the easy road or whatever that is, and we make our own road so hard. And so I think if we can trust these other people to handle our no, and trust that they can take care of their own emotions, that they're safe within themselves, that they have the emotional maturity to be like, how dare you say no to me? How dare you not do this thing I want? Why do you not think this is a good idea? Like, we can come up with all kinds of assumptions that we think could be the response to our no, but most often it really isn't that hard, and we've just turned it into the overdrive of the people pleasing and the not accepting that it's okay for us to have limits. It's okay for us to just say, gosh, I do not have enough energy in this season right now to take on responsibility for something else. I'm in the big college search with my oldest, and we're looking at scholarships and we're looking at all these things. And now that we've gotten into places, now we have to figure out how we're going to make it all happen. And it's like, oh, that's stressful. It's new for us. It's not as easy as it was back in the day. It's a completely different task. And so there are things that have to kind of say no. I have to say no to right now because I am learning something new over here. And that means I'm not taking on a new class or something that's going to take my energy elsewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, I keep thinking about I'm an overthinker. Maybe some of you can relate with that. And how I sometimes imagine when I'm trying to make a decision, what it would be like to not be an overthinker, to be somebody who just, says it like it is, almost maybe just like maybe a little robotic, where there's like no emotional attachment to answering this question, right? That it's like, because I'm somebody who really, I know that our nonverbal communication communicates so much of what we say, and so when I say something, I want to make sure that it's couched in appropriate nonverbals and all that stuff. But sometimes I'm like, what would it be like to just be like, yeah, no, and I've thought about the people in my life that I have been around who have been kind of just honest, decisive, like tell you like it is. And I have always respected those people. Like, I'm just like, damn, they really know. And they can say that real quickly and all these things. And I aspire at times to be like that, where I could just be like, not think about all the scenarios of like, what are they going to think? And what am I going to say? What, and all this stuff, just sort of like, yeah, no, that doesn't work for me. So it's interesting, if we challenge ourselves to be like, what would this be like to think about this like 5 or 10% less than I would normally think about this? How might I respond? Right? Or what would it be like if I could imagine, what would it be like to say no to something without worrying about how people are going to think about it? Like you said, Elizabeth, of like, maybe they're not even thinking anything about it, but we're worried that they are thinking about it. So then we've like spent all this time and energy worrying about their feelings when we don't really need to, right? And when we do that, we're kind of over functioning for them and their feelings, and we're not giving them the benefit of the doubt that like, they're an adult, they can handle this. And by the way, maybe if they decide, oh, I'm mad now at Megan for saying no, maybe they're not my people. Like maybe if they're not understanding, oh yeah, or like the good for her for saying, she can't do that right now or whatever. And I get that there's times where we feel like we have to say yes, but what would it be like if we really just honest truth telling? I think we need an episode about truth telling. I like that a lot.
In that sense of creating a supportive environment, and there may be some aspects of our life that is much easier to do that than others. And Megan, you were saying if your friends don't understand that, then maybe they're not the people that you need to go to. And I think about my own strong introvertedness, and I would say most of my friends know that if they want me to do something after work, it's just not going to happen. And they don't get offended by that. I'll talk to them on FaceTime or whatever all they want, but I'm probably not going to leave my home once I get home. And I think it's taken time to cultivate and kind of curate the friends that I do spend a lot of time with, who just know, I'm not trying to offend you. It's not personal. It's my energy. And
absolutely.
And so I think, thinking about discerning what is the supportive environment, whether it's at work, in our relationships, in our friendships, those kinds of things of who are the supportive people, and how do we cultivate an environment where we are more able to speak that truth.
Yes. Let's take a minute, because we did touch on this idea of power and control. I think Elizabeth brought that up in maybe part 1 of this episode, because I can also see where it is important for us to be in control of ourselves, right? And so when the negative part of that comes when we are feeling pulled by others, to make a decision we don't want to make, or the power that we feel others have over us, which really is us allowing them to have that power over us. And sometimes, depending on our belief system or whatever, it's tricky. There's a trickiness to that. But I wanted to touch back on that idea of power and control. And how do we, again, come back to the idea of empowerment? We empower ourselves to do what's best for ourselves. When we moved here to Louisville 10 years ago, I made a conscious decision when we moved here that I was going to tell everybody I'm an introvert, because I was like, I need everybody just to know up front, like, I'm an introvert, and that they can think about it however they want it. But now the friend group that I hang out with the most, they'll all look at their watches at like 8:00 and they'll be like, oh, Megan, it's past your bedtime, and they tease me about it. But what I found was that there was, because it's like the husbands and wives of the group we hang out with, and one of the partners in each of the couples was a little bit more of an introvert, and they would say like, oh, I'm so jealous that you just up and leave, because I'll also do like the Irish goodbye, where I just sort of like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom and go to, just kind of disappear, because I'm like, when I'm done, I'm done. It's time to just go. And sometimes I'll stay a little later, and sometimes, most of the time, I don't. So how do we own? I mean, it took me to be in my late 30s to own that, so that I could just tell people up front, like, this is who I am, don't mess with that,
I also think it's hard in our culture right now. Busyness is such a big part and being so tired. It's almost the tired Olympics. I mean, I don't think I run into any of my friends, or people that we come in contact with, the other moms of the other kids I know, and it's just like, who gets the award for being the busyness? Everybody just kind of complains of, oh, we don't have a single night where we're at home that we're not chauffeuring kids around, or we don't have a single night that we don't have a party this week, or that there's some obligation, or our weekends are so busy by Monday we're drained and exhausted. And I always kind of look at that and I'm like, oh, that feels awful to me. Like,
Yes.
I totally need a day at home where I can putz around my house, and people make jokes about I kind of keep the house clean, and that's through some assistance, but it's also kind of in my nature to, I really like to be in my house and put things away, and my kids' clothes are clean, so I'm not looking at a mountain of things, or the floor is completely covered in clothes. And so I can't feel comfortable in my skin, feel ready for my week if I have been at something every night, and if I have caught on to the culture. I mean, it's almost in the air we breathe of who gets to say that they're the tiredest and the busiest. And I'm just choosing of like, nope, I'm not running my kids every night to an activity. I don't feel like that's a good behavior to teach them, that they have no downtime, and they have no time for their homework, and they have no time to play video games or chat with their friends. And I'm choosing to protect our evenings and not feel guilty about it, to not feel like when somebody else comes up to me and they're like, oh my gosh, we're so busy, and I'm like, oh, I'm missing out. Oh, I've got the FOMO. Or like, oh, I should be a busier person because I'm trying to be very successful and achieve and make sure my kids are successful and make sure they have all these experiences and opportunities to develop into these amazing people. And it's like, woof, that is a lot. And that is not how I want to be intentional. I want my kids to remember having a dinner that they don't like around my kitchen table, because that's a good time. But like, just not, we just run all the time. And I don't want to be a part of that cultural experience of just
Right.
activity and not saying no to something.
And because we run all the time, there's no space for self-reflection. And I think that's really key to resentment and boundaries of, is this something that gives me energy and gives me life? And is it not? Do I like to be busy all of the time? If so, that's okay. I don't understand that, but that's okay. Or do I need that time at home? Do I need to be putting away things because that's soothing to me? And when we're busy all the time, that self-reflection piece is really hard. Of, is this a choice I'm making, or is this something I feel like I should be doing to keep up with whoever or whatever?
Yes, great discussion. Let's leave our listeners with a little bit of self-reflection, because Elizabeth said an interesting word, successful. I want to be successful. Here's what I want our listeners to think about is there could be multiple definitions of success. So everybody gets to decide what their definition of success is, whether it's in your family, whether it's you personally, but you get to decide what success is. You don't have to conform to, the societal ideas of success. You get to decide what you want that to be for yourself. Ladies, thank you for joining me today. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found this interesting. If you want to find more about us, visit the Mindfulness Center at mindfulness-center.com. We have all sorts of wonderful online classes and freebie videos and all sorts of things for you. And we hope you enjoy this. If you do, please like our podcast and send us an email. Tell us what you'd like to hear us talk about. Thanks so much. Have a great day.